The job offer. The rain poured heavy on the metal roofs of the spaceport bazaar, turning the dusty ground into rivers of mud. Shops were closing, lights dimming, and most traders hurried inside to keep dry. But one human, Daniel, stayed in his workshop, wiping grease off his hands after fixing an old engine. He liked the quiet after the day's noise. But tonight something was different. Through the glass of his shop's window, he noticed a figure standing in the rain, a tall alien woman, her clothes torn, holding the hand of a small child. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there as if waiting for something. Her large dark eyes looked empty, and her shoulders trembled from the cold. Daniel frowned, wondering why she didn't leave for shelter. Across the street, two alien merchants whispered to each other, laughing. "That widow again," one said. "She thinks someone will take her in." "No one wants her curse," the other replied. Shaking his head, Daniel felt his jaw tighten. The woman didn't look cursed. She looked desperate. Her child was shivering, too thin for his age, his small arms wrapped around his stomach. Daniel knew that hunger when he saw it. He had felt it himself years ago as a boy on Earth. And yet no one else in the bazaar seemed to care. Most doors were locked, most eyes looked away. Daniel stepped outside into the rain. He approached slowly, not wanting to scare her. The woman lowered her gaze when he stopped in front of her. Up close, he could see scars on her arms, marks that looked old but painful. Her child peeked out from behind her legs, hiding from the human's stare. "You'll get sick standing here," Daniel said softly. His voice was calm, but the woman flinched as if expecting anger. I can leave," she whispered. Her words broken, her accent heavy. Daniel shook his head. "That's not what I meant." He pointed to his workshop behind him. "You need work?" he asked. The woman blinked, confused, as if she had not expected kindness. "Yes," she said quietly, "but no one hires widows of my kind." Her words carried pain, as if she had repeated them too many times before. Daniel glanced at the child again, then back at her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she answered, barely audible. Daniel gave a short nod. "I'm Daniel." Inside the workshop, machines hummed and tools clinked. It wasn't much, but it was warmer than the street. Daniel led them in, ignoring the stares from nearby shops. He handed the child a piece of bread from his small food supply. The boy grabbed it with both hands and ate as if it was the first meal in days. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly wiped them away. "I can clean, cook, help with anything," she said quickly, afraid he might change his mind. "I don't ask much. Only food for him." She nodded at her son. Daniel studied her for a moment. She looked strong but tired, proud yet broken. There was something in her face, a mixture of suffering and dignity, that made him pause. "You'll work here," Daniel said firmly. "Help me keep the place in order. And you'll both have food and shelter." Lyra gasped, as if the words were too good to believe. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because no one deserves to stand in the rain like that," Daniel replied simply. But outside, unseen by them, two shadowed figures watched from the alley. One of them hissed, "The human took her in. He doesn't know what danger follows her." The other nodded slowly. "He will learn soon." Back inside, Daniel showed Lyra a small corner room in the back of the workshop. It wasn't much, just an old bed and a cracked window, but her son smiled wide as if it was a palace. Lyra bowed her head deeply, her long hair falling across her face. "Thank you, Daniel," she whispered. "You saved us." But Daniel only shrugged, not knowing how heavy her words truly were. For him, it was a simple act of kindness. For Lyra, it was the first spark of hope after years of darkness. Neither of them knew that this small decision, this single job offer, would change both of their lives forever. And outside, the rain kept falling, washing away the dirt of the spaceport, but not the shadows that had begun to gather around them. Whispers of trouble. The next morning, the spaceport bazaar was alive again. Merchants shouted prices, children ran between stalls, and the smell of cooked meat filled the air. Daniel's small workshop, however, was unusually quiet inside. Lyra swept the floor carefully, her son sitting nearby with a broken toy ship Daniel had given him. She worked with silent focus, almost afraid of making a mistake. Daniel watched her for a moment from his workbench. He noticed the way she moved, precise but tense, like someone always expecting punishment. "Relax," he said with a half-smile. "The floor isn't going to run away." Lyra blinked at him, surprised by his humor, then gave a small nod. Her son giggled softly, and Daniel felt the air grow lighter. But outside, whispers had already started. Two alien women passed the workshop, their eyes sharp. "Did you hear?" "The human hired her," one muttered. "The widow of the cursed clan. He must be mad," the other replied. Their voices carried just enough to reach inside. Lyra froze, her hands tightening around the broom handle. Daniel heard too, his jaw clenching. He wanted to step outside and silence them. But Lyra shook her head quickly. "Please, don't," she whispered. "It will only bring more trouble." Her eyes held fear, not for herself, but for Daniel. He realized then that her curse was not just a word. It was a weapon society used against her. Later that day, a customer came in with a damaged engine. Daniel and Lyra worked side by side, handing tools, tightening bolts. The man stared at Lyra with open disgust. "You let her touch human tools?" he spat. Daniel straightened, his voice cold. "She's my assistant. You want the engine fixed or not?" The man grumbled but said nothing more. When the customer left, Lyra whispered, "You shouldn't defend me. It will make enemies." Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead and shrugged. "Then let them be enemies," he said simply. Lyra stared at him, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak more, but instead she lowered her eyes. That night, as Daniel locked up the shop, he noticed something strange on the metal door. Deep scratches had been carved. The marks formed words in an alien script he didn't recognize. He called Lyra over, and her face drained of color when she saw it. "What does it say?" Daniel asked. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "It says, 'Leave her or lose everything.'" Daniel's stomach turned. "Who did this?" he demanded. Lyra shook her head, trembling. "They don't forgive. My husband. He died because he refused their demands." Her son, too young to understand, hugged her leg, sensing her fear. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. "Steady but firm. You're safe here," he said. But even as he spoke, he felt eyes on him from the shadows of the street. The bazaar, once full of noise, seemed suddenly too quiet, too watchful. Days passed, and the whispers grew louder. Some customers stopped coming, afraid of being seen near the cursed widow. Others came only to insult, throwing coins on the counter as if touching Lyra's hands would stain them. Daniel stood tall against each insult, but business grew thin. Lyra tried to leave one morning, saying, "I don't want to ruin you." Daniel blocked the door, his voice hard. "You're not leaving. We faced this together." That evening, Daniel sat alone at his bench, staring at an old photo of Earth. He remembered his father's words. "A man is measured not by profit, but by who he protects." He closed the picture and looked toward the back room, where Lyra hummed a soft alien lullaby, her son falling asleep in her arms. Daniel realized his choice was already made. He would stand with them, no matter the cost, but danger was already moving closer. In a smoky tavern on the far side of the port, 3 cloaked figures whispered around a table. "The human protects her now," one hissed. "Then the human must pay," another replied. A third leaned forward, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Her bloodline should have ended with her husband. "We will finish what we started." Back in the workshop, Daniel lay awake on his narrow bed. The rain had returned, tapping against the roof. He thought of the warning carved into his door. He thought of the hollow look in Lyra's eyes when she spoke of her husband. And he thought of the child, smiling for the first time in who knows how long. Daniel closed his eyes, but sleep never came, because deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The bazaar might forget kindness, but the shadows never forget a grudge, and soon, Daniel would learn the full weight of the trouble he had welcomed into his life. The trouble that walked with the widow and her son. A bond beyond work. The days turned into weeks, and life inside Daniel's workshop began to change. At first, Lyra moved with caution, always keeping her eyes down, always waiting for him to grow angry. But Daniel was patient, never raising his voice, never treating her like the others did. Slowly, she began to relax, her shoulders less tense, her voice less afraid. Daniel noticed small things, the way she organized tools better than he ever had, the way she learned quickly, asking quiet questions about human machines, and how she could fix mistakes with clever hands more than once. Daniel caught himself watching her, not just as a worker, but as someone with strength hidden under her silence. Her son, little Taryn, grew bolder too. The boy laughed while playing with scraps of metal. He called Daniel uncle one morning without thinking. The word surprised everyone, even himself. Daniel chuckled and ruffled the boy's hair, but Lyra's eyes filled with tears she quickly tried to hide. One afternoon, as Daniel worked on a damaged hoverbike, Lyra stood beside him. She handed him tools with practiced timing. "Good," Daniel said, nodding. "You learn fast." Her lips curled into a shy smile. "No one ever said that to me before," she admitted. Daniel blinked, wondering what kind of life she had lived where no one praised her. "Well, I mean it," he replied simply. The sound of laughter echoed through the shop. Taryn had balanced on an old crate, pretending to fly his toy ship. "Look, Uncle, I'm a pilot," the boy shouted. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. But when he looked at Lyra, her gaze was soft, almost glowing. She was staring at Daniel, not with fear, but with something gentler, something new. Yet outside, the bazaar was still cruel. Merchants avoided Daniel, whispering as he passed. One spat at the ground near his boots, muttering, "The human and his cursed widow." Daniel ignored it, but Lyra saw. That night she sat by the dim light of a lantern, sewing a torn cloth. Her voice low, she said, "You don't need to suffer this, because of me." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "Lyra," he said firmly, "I don't regret a thing." But peace did not last long. One evening, when Daniel closed the shop, he found a strange object at the doorstep. A bone charm, carved with symbols, wrapped in black cloth. He showed it to Lyra, and she paled. "This is a death mark," she whispered, her hands trembling. Daniel's brow furrowed. "Meaning?" "They are warning you. They won't stop until one of us is gone," she said. Her voice breaking, Daniel felt anger rise inside him. "I won't let anyone touch you or Taryn," he said through clenched teeth. Lyra lowered her head, her long hair hiding her face. "You don't understand. My husband died because of them," she confessed. Her body shook as she spoke. "He tried to fight back and they killed him in the street." Daniel was silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Then he stepped closer, his voice calm but unyielding. "Then we'll be smarter. We'll stand together." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide. For the first time she saw no fear in someone's gaze, only resolve. The next morning Daniel taught Lyra how to use one of his tools properly. Their hands brushed, and she froze, unused to such closeness. Daniel didn't move away. "Here," he said gently, guiding her fingers around the handle. Her heart raced, her chest rising and falling faster, but she nodded, learning, trying to focus. Their closeness stirred feelings she didn't dare name. At night, Taryn curled up on the bed in the back room. Daniel sat at his bench while Lyra quietly brewed tea from alien herbs. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was warm. "On my world," Lyra said softly, "widows are treated as nothing, like shadows, I thought. I thought I would fade away too." Daniel met her eyes across the dim room. "Not here," he said. "Here you're part of this place, part of us." Her lips parted as if to reply, but she only lowered her gaze, hiding a smile. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, and that scared her even more than the threats outside. But the danger was not gone. One late night, as Daniel closed the shutters, he caught a glimpse of movement in the alley. Two dark shapes stood watching, their eyes glinting in the shadows. When he stepped forward, they vanished into the maze of streets. Daniel's chest tightened. Whoever they were waiting, watching, planning. Inside, unaware of his unease, Lyra hummed to her son. Her voice was gentle, carrying hope. Daniel leaned against the wall, listening, and in that moment, he realized something dangerous. He was no longer helping them out of pity. He was protecting them because he cared. The workshop, once just a place of work, had become something more. A fragile bond was forming inside its walls. A bond between a human, a widow, and her child. But beyond those walls, shadows sharpened their knives, ready to cut that bond before it could grow stronger. The Night of Fire. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. The spaceport bazaar usually echoed with late laughter, drunken songs, or the clatter of closing stalls. But on this evening, silence spread across the streets. Only the hum of distant engines broke the stillness. Daniel worked late in his shop. Lyra was folding blankets in the back room while Taryn slept peacefully on the bed. The smell of oil and metal lingered in the air. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes and thought about closing for the night. Suddenly, a faint sound came from outside, like glass shattering. Daniel froze, listening. Another sound followed, the whoosh of liquid being poured, then the unmistakable crackle of fire. "Lyra!" he shouted, rushing to the door. When he opened it, his blood ran cold. Flames had erupted at the edge of the workshop, orange tongues licking up wooden crates soaked in oil. Shadows darted away, laughter echoing as footsteps disappeared into the night. Lyra appeared, clutching Taryn, her face pale with terror. "What's happening?" she cried. "They set us on fire." Daniel growled. Grabbing a bucket of water, he dashed outside, throwing water on the flames, but more oil was already spreading. The fire hissed and flared higher, the heat burning his skin. Taryn began to wail, his small voice rising in panic. Lyra tried to calm him, but her own hands shook violently. "Stay inside with him," Daniel ordered. But she didn't listen. She grabbed another bucket and ran beside him. Her alien eyes glistened in the firelight, fierce despite her fear. Together they fought the flames. Smoke filled their lungs. Sparks danced dangerously near the roof. Daniel's arms ached. His throat burned. But he refused to let the workshop burn. It was his home, their shelter, their last safety. As the fire spread, one of the shadowed figures returned. He stood across the street, face hidden by a hood. His voice was cruel, mocking. "Leave the widow, human, or next time we burn you alive with her." Daniel's anger flared hotter than the flames. He dropped the bucket and charged across the street. The figure laughed and pulled a blade. Steel glinted under the firelight. They clashed in the shadows. Daniel fought with bare fists, blocking, striking. The man's knife slashed his arm, blood dripping. But Daniel didn't stop. He roared with fury, punching the attacker to the ground. The man spat blood, then scrambled up and vanished into the dark alleys, leaving behind cruel laughter. Breathing hard, Daniel stumbled back toward the workshop. His arm burned, but he ignored it. Lyra rushed to him, her hands trembling as she pressed cloth to his wound. "You're hurt," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Daniel shook his head. "I'm alive. That's enough." The fire finally dimmed after hours of fighting it. The workshop was blackened with smoke. But still standing, Lyra sat with Taryn in her arms, rocking him until his cries faded into sleep. Daniel watched them, his chest heavy. Something inside him changed that night. This wasn't just about kindness anymore. It was survival. It was family. When dawn broke, the bazaar was buzzing with rumors. Some whispered that the human was cursed now too. Others said he was foolish to risk his life for a widow, but a few spoke quietly of courage, of how he faced the flames when most would have run. Back inside the workshop, Daniel sat at his bench, his arm bandaged clumsily. Lyra came to him, her eyes red but steady. "You could have died. Why do you do this for us?" she asked, voice trembling. Daniel looked at her, his expression calm but firm. "Because no one should face fire alone," he said. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her head, tears falling silently. For years, she had carried pain and loss. But here was a human, bleeding and exhausted, choosing to protect her and her child. In that moment, Lyra realized something frightening. She was beginning to trust him, beginning to feel something deeper than gratitude. That night, after Taryn finally slept, Lyra stood by the doorway, watching the stars. Daniel joined her, his arm still bandaged. The sky shimmered with distant ships flying between worlds. But for them, the universe felt very small. Just a workshop, a widow, a child, and a human who refused to give up. Yet in the far distance, shadows stirred again. The men who had attacked whispered in anger. "The fire failed," one hissed. Then we'll strike harder, another growled, and the third slammed his fist onto the table. We will not stop until the widow and her protector are ash. Hidden feelings. The fire was gone, but its smoke still clung to the walls of the workshop. Every time Daniel stepped inside, the charred smell reminded him of how close they had come to losing everything. He worked harder than before, fixing what he could, repairing machines, cleaning soot. But no matter how much he fixed, he could not erase the memory of Lyra's terrified eyes that night. Lyra, too, had changed. She no longer stayed in the shadows. She moved closer when Daniel worked, standing beside him, handing tools without needing to be asked. Her eyes followed him when he wasn't looking, and her voice grew softer when she spoke his name. Taryn laughed more, running around the shop, his small footsteps echoing against the metal floor. To him, this place was no longer just a workshop, it was home. But outside whispers turned sharper. Did you hear? A merchant sneered. The human bleeds for her like a husband, another spat. Shameful. Their blood should never mix. The words reached Daniel's ears, but he ignored them. Yet every insult sank deeper into Lyra's heart. One evening, after closing the shop, Daniel sat at his bench, tired. He rubbed his sore arm where the knife had cut him during the fire. Lyra walked over, carrying a small bowl of healing herbs mixed into a paste. Let me change the bandage, she said softly. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Her hands were gentle, careful. She pressed the paste against his wound, her touch warm despite the sting. Daniel studied her face up close, the faint scars on her cheek, the tired beauty in her eyes. You don't have to do this, he said. His voice low, her gaze lifted to his, steady but trembling. I want to, she whispered. For a moment silence filled the room. The air felt heavy, charged. Daniel wanted to speak, but words failed him. Lyra quickly looked away, finishing the bandage. Her cheeks flushed with color. Later that night, as Taryn slept, Lyra sat by the dim lamp, sewing torn fabric. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, watching her. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly. She paused, needle frozen in her hand. Her voice shook when she replied, But I feel like I do. You saved us again and again. Daniel walked closer, his shadow falling across her. I didn't save you because I had to, Lyra, he said. I did it because I couldn't watch you suffer. Her eyes widened, her hands trembling with the fabric. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not even her late husband. She lowered her gaze, unable to answer, but inside, her heart raced with something unfamiliar, something that scared her more than fire or threats. The next day, Daniel went to the market to buy parts. When he returned, he found Lyra standing outside the shop, staring at the scratched warning on the door. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight. Daniel, they won't stop, she said, her voice breaking. You should let us go. Daniel dropped the bag of parts with a heavy thud. Go where? He demanded. They'll hunt you too if we stay, she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Then let them come, Daniel said fiercely. This is your home now. You're not leaving. She stared at him, stunned for the first time in years. Someone chose her not out of duty, not out of pity, but out of will. Her chest tightened and she quickly turned away, afraid he might see the tears spilling down her cheeks that night. Taryn climbed onto Daniel's lap while he sat at his bench. Uncle? The boy asked sleepily. Will you always stay with us? Daniel froze, his heart aching at the innocent question. He looked at Lyra across the room, her face half hidden in shadow. Waiting for his answer, Daniel hugged Taryn close. Yes, always, he said firmly. The boy smiled, drifting into sleep, and Lyra's eyes shimmered in the dim light, full of emotions she could no longer hide. But danger lurked closer in the far side of the bazaar. The same cloaked figures gathered again. The human protects her like she is his, one growled. Then we will strike at him through her, another hissed. The third leaned forward, his eyes cold. Break the bond. And the human will break too, back in the workshop. Daniel sat awake, his thoughts restless. He thought of his father's words. He thought of the scars on Lyra's hands, the quiet way she laughed when Taryn played. And he thought of the fire, of how close he had come to losing them both. His chest tightened with a truth he could no longer deny. He wasn't just protecting them. He was falling for them, for Lyra, for Taryn, for the fragile family they had become. But he also knew this truth came with a price. The shadows would never allow it, and sooner or later, they would come again. Not with fire, but with something worse. The choice morning light spilled through the cracked windows of the workshop. The fire damage was mostly repaired, but the scars remained. Black streaks on the walls, melted metal in corners. To Daniel, those marks were a reminder of what they had survived. To Lyra, they were a warning of what was still coming. Word of the attack had spread through the bazaar like wildfire. Some called Daniel brave, others called him foolish. But whispers grew sharper, and soon the rumors reached the council. The alien elders who ruled the marketplace summoned Daniel. The meeting hall was vast, filled with strange banners and carved stone. Daniel stood before the council, their alien eyes cold and watchful. An elder with pale skin and golden tattoos leaned forward. "Human," he said, his voice echoing. "You employ a widow from the cursed line." Daniel stood tall, refusing to bow. "She works hard, she harms no one." "What crime is that?" The elder's lips curled. "Her presence brings unrest. Customers avoid your shop. Fear spreads." "This cannot continue," another elder hissed. "You must release her from your service. Send her away or lose your right to trade here." Daniel felt his blood boil. He had built this workshop with his own hands. Every tool, every machine was his life's work. But when he thought of Lyra and little Taryn, he knew his choice was already made. "I won't cast them out," Daniel said firmly. Gasps echoed through the chamber. "You dare defy us?" one elder snapped. Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice steady. "If keeping my license means abandoning them, then take it. I'd rather lose the shop than lose my family." The hall fell silent. The word family hung heavy in the air. The elders glared, their pride wounded. But Daniel didn't flinch when he returned to the workshop. Lyra was waiting by the door, her face pale with worry. "What did they say?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel looked at her, his expression calm but tired. "They told me to send you away," he said. Her heart sank, her hands tightening at her sides. "And what did you answer?" Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I told them no. I told them you and Taryn are my family." Lyra's breath caught, her chest rising sharply. Her eyes filled with tears, though she turned away quickly. Why would you risk everything for us?" she whispered. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because no one else ever did," he said softly. That night, the bazaar was buzzing with news of Daniel's defiance. Some called him reckless, others admired his courage, but in the shadows, the men who hated Lyra sharpened their blades. "The council is weak," one spat. "The human mocks their order. We will deal with him ourselves." Another nodded grimly. "Strike soon before their bond grows stronger." Meanwhile, inside the workshop, Daniel tried to lighten the air. He sat at his bench, showing Taryn how to fix a small broken gear. The boy laughed, his little hands clumsy but eager. "Good work," Daniel said warmly. Taryn beamed, looking at him with wide, trusting eyes. Lyra stood nearby, her heart aching at the sight. For the first time in years, her son was happy. And it was because of this human. When Taryn finally fell asleep, Daniel and Lyra remained in the quiet shop. The air was heavy with unspoken words. "You shouldn't have done this," Lyra whispered suddenly, breaking the silence. "You gave up everything for us." Daniel shook his head, his gaze steady. "I didn't lose anything worth more than you," he said. Her breath caught again, her chest tight. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was a fool, but her heart betrayed her, pounding hard with feelings she had buried for too long. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. Daniel reached out, brushing one away gently with his rough fingers. The touch was brief, but it burned through her like fire. Still, fear lingered in her eyes. "What if they hurt you?" "Because of me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Daniel leaned closer, his voice calm but firm. "Then they'll learn what it means to fight a human who has something to protect." The bond between them grew stronger that night. Neither spoke the word love, but it lived in every glance, every touch, every choice they made. Yet both knew it came with a cost. The council might step back, but the men in the shadows would not. They had failed to burn the workshop, failed to break Daniel's will. But they were patient and their knives were sharp. As the stars glittered above the bazaar, Daniel sat awake. He thought of Earth, of the lessons his father taught him, and he thought of Lyra's quiet strength, her son's laughter. This wasn't just kindness anymore. This was his life now, and he would not let anyone take it from him. But outside, in the darkness beyond the bazaar lights, a new plan was already forming. a plan that would strike at Daniel's heart and test whether his choice to protect them could truly withstand the storm that was coming. A new beginning. The days after Daniel's defiance were tense. The council stayed silent, but their silence felt dangerous in the bazaar. Some merchants avoided him completely, others whispered with grudging respect, and always from the corners of the alleys. Daniel felt eyes watching. He worked harder than ever, fixing machines by day. Guarding the shop by night, Lyra stayed close, helping him more boldly than before. Her fear had not vanished, but she no longer hid in shadows. And Terran, carefree in his innocence, played with his toy ships as if nothing in the galaxy could touch them. But the shadows struck again one night. Daniel awoke to a sharp noise, metal against metal. He leapt from his bed, grabbing a wrench. The door shook as someone tried to force it open. Lyra clutched Terran to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. Daniel's heart pounded, but his jaw set. When the door finally cracked open, 3 masked men rushed in. Blades flashing, Daniel roared, swinging his wrench. The first man fell back with a broken jaw. The second lunged, cutting across Daniel's side. Pain seared through him, but he fought on. Every strike, every punch was not for himself, it was for Lyra and Terran. Lyra screamed as the third attacker grabbed her arm. Dragging her toward the door, Daniel saw red. He slammed the second man into the wall and lunged forward. With a single furious blow, he knocked the third to the ground. The attackers scrambled, retreating into the night. But not before hissing a promise. This isn't over. Human. We will end you all. Daniel collapsed to one knee. Blood staining his shirt, Lyra dropped beside him, pressing cloth to his wound, her hands trembling. You're bleeding too much, she whispered. Tears streaming, Daniel caught her hand, his grip weak but steady. I told you. I won't let them take you, he said. His voice rough. That night changed everything. The attackers did not return, perhaps fearing Daniel's fury, perhaps planning something worse. But within the workshop walls, something new had taken root. As Daniel recovered, Lyra stayed by his side. She cared for his wounds, cooked his meals, and sat awake through long nights. Their conversations grew deeper, their silences warmer. Sometimes their hands touched by accident. Sometimes their eyes met and lingered too long, and slowly, the unspoken feelings between them became impossible to hide. One evening, as stars glowed above the bazaar, Daniel stepped outside. Lyra followed, her long hair catching the moonlight. The night was calm for once, no fire, no shadows. Only the hum of distant ships. Do you regret staying with us? She asked softly, breaking the silence. Daniel turned, meeting her gaze. Not for a second, he replied. Her lips parted, trembling. I thought I would be alone forever, she admitted. Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady. Not anymore. Her breath caught, her heart racing, and before she could stop herself, she leaned closer. Their lips met in a kiss. Soft and trembling at first, then deeper, stronger. For a moment, all the fear, all the danger vanished. It was just them. 2 souls clinging to the hope of something better. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to rhythm. The shop remained, scarred but alive. Customers began to return, drawn not only by Daniel's skill, but by the strange courage of the human who defied the council. Lyra worked openly at his side now, no longer hiding her face. And Terran laughed more than ever, running between them, calling Daniel father without hesitation. Then one evening, as Daniel tightened a bolt on an engine, Lyra stood behind him, her hands folded nervously. Daniel, she said softly, her voice trembling. He turned, noticing the way her cheeks flushed. I carry your child, she whispered. The wrench slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor for a moment. He stood frozen, stunned. Her eyes searched his face, afraid of what he might say. But then Daniel stepped forward, pulling her into his arms. His voice was rough but full of emotion. Then we'll raise this child together. All of us, family. Lyra's tears spilled freely. But this time they were tears of joy. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt hope for tomorrow. Not just survival, but life, love, and belonging. Outside, the bazaar still whispered. Some still mocked, some still spat. But others watched in quiet awe. The human who once stood alone now stood with a family. And nothing, not fire, not blades, not threats, could take that away. As the stars burned bright above the port, Daniel held Lyra close. Terran slept soundly in the back room. And in the workshop that had once been only metal and machines, a new beginning had taken root. one forged in fire, bound by love, and strong enough to face whatever shadows still lingered in the galaxy.